Here we go again, back in the world of more Kingston Smith and David reviews. Look at the world of advertising. Delighted again that Jason is with me. And this week we are coming from a completely different angle, looking at it from an agency perspective, and delighted to have with us Anna Arnell, creative partner at And Rising.
Hi.
Hi. So Anna, what challenges do you think that COVID has created for agencies in particular?
I think it's actually kind of accelerated and magnified challenges that agencies were already experiencing. Just challenges, to do with not just finances, but creativity, time, lots of things that agencies were already grappling with. I kind of think it's accelerated those problems and heightened them as well.
And Jason has been very critical of the creativity that's come out through the last, what now seems about 6 months, but it's probably about week 15. Would you share that, and what would you attribute that to?
I mean, I think people probably sort of panic-made ads. I do think there were too many ads of empty streets and manifestos. I don't know why agencies suddenly have an urge to write manifestos like the whole world needs lecturing. I'm not sure that's the right way to go. So I think people everything was just, right, we've got to make it fast, we've got to make it cheap. And so that inevitably leads to not very good creative work.
Do you think we get through that? Do you think there's a period where that now settles down and we get through that?
Yeah, definitely. I think people know that we don't want to see any more Zoom ads or empty streets or manifestos about, the world and what the state of the world is. I think people have to be more imaginative than that and push their clients. Like, everything is kind of out of the window. Like, all rules are off. The only rules are, wear a mask and keep a distance. Everything else is like, what can you do that you haven't done before in an interesting way? But I think the other thing is that maybe the industry's not been that creative, but outside of the industry, you've seen things like the speed at which communities got together to create, volunteer groups for people in need. This, I've seen priests baptizing babies with super soaker water pistols.
Literally the best. That's literally been the best thing in the whole lockdown and quarantine. Yeah.
I've seen McDonald's drive-through opened up, and people without cars have gone in kiddie cars through the drive-through. So, creativity is still in the world. It just, it's just about harnessing it and sort of backing it.
Maybe if you're a big business, you become naturally cautious at this point, and individuals can express themselves where businesses think they can't.
Yeah, I think, people are worried for their jobs. People, not just that, but there's so much where everyone's feeling really vulnerable. Like, people are worried about, family members catching the virus, vulnerable people in their families. All of that feeling will have an impact on your work, because especially if you're a creative person, like your creative self and your life outside of creativity, it's really hard to separate. So how you're feeling will be reflected in your work.
Can I pick up on the word manifesto, because that brings us to the other major issue which has confronted the advertising industry in the last few weeks, because obviously there's been an extraordinary response to the killing of George Floyd in the United States, and that has prompted brands and the agency world to have a look at itself in terms of its own issues with systemic racism. Obviously, Anna, as a BME person yourself, it strikes me that this is something that you must have confronted through your whole career. What would you say about the introspection, if it can be called that, or certainly the exhibitions of support and so on that are going on at the moment? And are you confident or optimistic that something might actually change this time?
Well, specifically on the police brutality in America, the positive thing to take out is that certain police are actually being held accountable and are being arrested. I think just this momentum needs to carry on to get justice for those who haven't got justice. So I think that's a positive thing to take out of this movement. I think, so that's on like a global level. I think on a more sort of personal level for me and other, you know, people of color in the industry and Black people in the industry, it's been really difficult because basically you kind of, you're reading everyone's stories of racism in the industry which have come out, and then you start to like basically relive all of your own experiences of racism in the industry. So it's like really quite, it's just exhausting. You know, I think I'm part of the POC, We Are POC group, which is I think like a 500 strong members. We're all in a WhatsApp group together, and everyone is just really trying to use this time to just propel change with action, not with kind of just signing a thing or posting a black square. Like, what are the actual tangible things? And not just, you know, I've seen lots of jobs pop up for people looking for head of diversity at their agency or at their, wherever their company is. And it's like, really the best thing you can do is hire a person of color or a Black person for a job that they are good at. Like not just to be the head of diversity person. So it's, you know, it's this year is, so much has changed, but I think it's all burning down to the ground, and I think we've got to rebuild it in a more positive way than it was before.
I think a number of people who are watching this might be surprised for you to characterize yourself as someone who has faced racism in the industry. I think one of the great difficulties with confronting racism in the advertising industry is that a lot of white people who work in this business think that they're not racist, and they think there isn't racism. And I think part of the reason for that is it's very hard to put your head above the parapet when you're just trying to build a career and make an issue of it the whole time. Has that been your experience? Have you felt that you can't really voice your own experiences too loudly for fear of being characterized as, you know, the sort of being characterized as angry?
Yeah, I think there a lot of people feel like that. I think I've spent my whole career at 18 Feet and Rising, which I've been very, very lucky to have an incredible ally in Jonathan Trimble. You know, he promoted me. You know, I'd only worked in the industry for 5 years when he promoted me to ECD, knowing that some clients would not be happy with me, someone looking like me, having the head creative role of an agency. So I think I think you have to be really careful who you're surrounding yourself with. And, you know, I've been lucky that he's been by my side when there have been instances, you know, like when I was promoted, a couple of people who I thought were my friends actually just completely ignored me and stopped talking to me and stopped talking to JT because they were so jealous that they didn't get that job, and they were so angry. And it was a really, really difficult time. And at the time, I think now, if it happened now, I would handle the situation completely differently. But I sort of just I just accepted it. And, you know, I just didn't know what to do. So I think there's just so much in terms of, you know, like everyday microaggressions, I think, are a thing. But my main thing is, I feel I've been lucky to be in a small agency, and an agency generally of good people, with a CEO who's backed me, because you need that confidence. Like if you are a Black person or a person of color in the creative industry, you have to be vulnerable to put your ideas out there. Like the best creatives in the world are vulnerable creatives because they're putting their soul on paper. So if you're in an environment where you don't feel comfortable to voice your own creativity, you're never going to progress anyway. You're never going to learn because you've always got this guard up. So I think going forward, right, I don't know how many agencies have signed this kind of diversity statement. It's like every single one of those agencies needs to create a safe space for us to be able to be creative, you know, in those spaces. I feel so lucky to have had JT back me this whole time. You know, I've been free to sort of say what I want. And if there's ever been a person in the room who has kind of impacted my confidence, they don't last very long in that agency.
There's been a lot of, I mean, it's not only necessarily a racial issue, there's free the beard in terms of gender. And do you feel there is, I mean, there's momentum for change, but do you actually feel there is change?
I think we will see. I think.
Good answer.
Yeah. Like, you know, we should do a 6-month check-in and see.
We're happy to.
Actually,
I think that's the important thing. Yeah, I think, you know, as you said earlier, Anna, we need plans of action rather than statements of intent, and we need measurable objectives so that we can audit it, come back in 6 months' time when the fuss has died down. One of the most dispiriting things I've seen in the last couple of days was a small independent bookshop that ordered, got a corporate client order 140 copies of Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race. That the order was then cancelled at the last minute. So it feels as though the momentum is already trailing off if a company can basically, in a moment of sort of wanting to learn and educate themselves, order the books, but literally within a week say, actually, we don't need those.
Yeah, absolutely. And the same, I heard, I don't know if this is true, so it needs fact checking, but that we're doing a kind of $10,000 grants for Black people for their businesses, but they then wanted full rights to the IP of that business. So it's like, you guys that is not helping. That is not helping Black business. That is capitalizing on Black Lives Matter.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that's the thing. Everything's got to be more responsible and more genuine. I think there's a lot of bandwagon hopping going on at the moment. Bandwagon joyriding, actually. Nothing more or less than that.
Can we focus also now maybe on Jason's hobby horse of what particular work maybe has interested you or excited you during the last 14 weeks? I always allow Jason to have the last say on the basis that he normally says he doesn't like anything, but I'm going to give you first shot, Anna.
Okay, well, do you know what? I think first of all, the TV industry is booming in terms of the quality of writing in TV shows, is incredible. I just think,
yeah, I agree.
You know, I feel so inspired by TV shows at the moment. There's no way you can't, you know, work in a creative industry and not be completely inspired what's going on in there. So I think that's where, at the moment, where I'm looking to for my inspiration for creativity. I think in terms of advertising, I think Ben & Jerry's statement was fantastic about Black Lives Matter and really sort of led the way for how other brands should behave and like what it actually means to have a purpose, because brands talk a lot about purpose and having a purpose, but they find it very, very difficult to stick to the actions of the purpose. You know, I think Beyonce using her platform to celebrate Black business was incredible as well. So I think there's pockets of like really interesting campaigns going on.
Jason, here's your moment every week to tell us what you've enjoyed.
No, I've got some good news for you, Graham. There's two instances. One of them is a film which is obviously filmed pre-lockdown, but has got a lot of VFX, so it's only just come out, and that's The Money Supermarket, which is directed by Nick Ball out of Engine, and I think it's fantastic, and it is significant, even though it's a pre-lockdown piece of work. This is the one, I don't know if you've seen it, the one with the bull. And it's brilliant. It's really funny, and what's important about it is that the client was willing to put it out there, because I think there's a great fear of humour at the moment. In fact, we've talked about this before, Graham. Everyone's scared of getting the tone wrong, and that's contributing massively to the creative inertia, because social media amplifies this enormously. If you get it wrong, you may get crucified on Twitter and so on, and that creates the fear. So I think it's great that they got that out there rather than feeling they had to hold it back until, you know, sort of better times. It's a great piece of work. And the other film, which I'm encouraged by enormously, is a film by Jacques Salmon of '76 for PayPal. And it's you know, in the normal scheme of things, this is just a decent piece of work. But at the moment, filmed under lockdown conditions, but made to look as though it wasn't. In other words, I think part of the problem we've seen in the last 14 weeks has been a constant tendency towards ensuring that everybody knows that the film has been made under lockdown conditions by literally downgrading production values to make that clear. Here they've tried to make the best film they can, and that's something I have to applaud and have to really encourage as much as possible, because the key thing is, this is not as temporary a state of affairs as a lot of people want to think.
No.
We're going to be living with the ramifications of this for a very long time. So get your act together and start working out how you can make the best films possible, because in 6 months' time, you don't want to still find yourself, excusing yourselves by saying stuff was made under lockdown. It's got to get better.
On that happy note that we're going to be living with this for a long time, we will wrap up, and also with a promise to Anna that we'll be back in 6 months' time as a kind of sanity check on how far the industry has gone.
Great.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.